All right, let's talk about the Epstein files. This is a story that's just staggering. We're talking about unbelievable wealth, power that seemed to have no limits, and horrific crimes that went all the way to the top. So let's break it down.
So you've got this infamous private island, right? A whole network of the world's most powerful people. And then the guy at the center of it all turns up dead in a super secure jail. The official story, well, it's got some serious holes. Holes that have spawned a million theories. Our job here is to cut through the noise and look at what the evidence actually tells us.
Okay, so to really understand what was going on, we have to start at the epicenter. We're headed to the Caribbean, to a private island that looked like paradise on the surface, but was really the heart of a criminal empire. I mean, the setup on this island, Little St. James, was just insane. People called it Epstein Island for a reason. It's a 72-acre private luxury spot with its own docks, a cinema, the whole nine yards. But it's what was going on beneath all that luxury that's so disturbing. We're talking about reports of underground tunnels, a really strange temple-like building, and of course, that private jet with the sickening nickname, the Lolita Express. So the big question is, how does one guy build something like this? I mean, where did all this money and power come from? To get that, we've got to go back to the beginning. You know, you might be surprised to hear that Epstein actually started out as a math teacher back in the 70s, but he didn't stay there long. He made the leap to Wall Street, and by the 90s, he was in the inner circle, managing money for billionaires like Leslie Wexner, the guy behind Victoria's Secret. That kind of access, plus the huge commissions he was making, is what let him build his own insane empire with luxury properties all over the world. Okay, so with that kind of money, he built this incredible network of powerful people. But we need to be clear, this wasn't just about schmoozing at parties. This network became the engine for his crimes, and at the very core of that engine was a critical partnership. So how did it all work? Well, think of it like this. Epstein was the money man, the mastermind with all the power. But Ghislaine Maxwell, she was the recruiter, the madam. She was the one who allegedly went out and found vulnerable young girls, luring them in with these false promises of money, jobs, and a path to a better life. And the names in his little black book are just staggering. We're talking about former President Bill Clinton, who flew on that private jet 26 times. Donald Trump, who was a friend of his back in the 90s. You've got Prince Andrew, who was accused by Virginia Giuffres of abusing her when she was just 17, a scandal that basically ended his public life. And the list just goes on and on. Tech giants, Hollywood A-listers, you name it. So with friends in that many high places, you have to wonder, can a person just buy their way out of trouble? Well, back in 2008, when the law finally seemed to be catching up with Epstein, the world got an answer. And it was a pretty shocking one. People have called this one of the biggest travesties of justice, and it's easy to see why. He was facing serious federal charges, with dozens of victims ready to testify. But somehow, his high-powered legal team cut a secret deal with the U.S. attorney at the time, Alexander Acosta. The craziest part? The victims had no idea this was happening. So instead of potentially spending the rest of his life in prison, he gets just 18 months in a county jail. And get this, he was on work release, meaning he could leave the jail every day to go to his office. He ended up serving only 13 months. It's just unbelievable.
And for a long, long time, it looked like he got away with it, scot-free. But then, about a decade later, things started to change. Thanks to some incredible journalism and the bravery of his victims who refused to stay silent, the whole thing was blown wide open again. And what happened next? Nobody could have predicted. It all started to unravel, and it happened fast. In 2018, a reporter named Julie K. Brown published this explosive series that exposed that whole 2008 sweetheart deal. People were furious. By July 2019, Epstein was arrested again, this time on federal sex trafficking charges. No deal was on the table. But then, just a month later, before he could name any names, he's found dead in his jail cell. The story didn't end there, though. A year later, Ghislaine Maxwell was arrested, and she's now in prison serving a 20-year sentence.
Now, the official story is that he committed suicide. But let's be real, the timing was convenient, right? I mean, incredibly convenient for a lot of very powerful people who were probably terrified of what he might say on the stand. And this right here is probably the biggest question mark hanging over this entire saga. Let's just look at the facts surrounding his death, because they are weird. First, the 2 CCTV cameras right outside his cell just happened to malfunction that night. Second, the 2 guards who were supposed to be watching him They both fell asleep for hours. And maybe the most critical detail, he'd been taken off suicide watch just a few days before, even though he'd had what looked like a prior attempt. You put all that together, and it's no wonder so many people are convinced he was silenced. So Epstein is dead, Maxwell is behind bars. But this story is absolutely not over, not by a long shot. The fight for the whole truth is still going on. His victims are still fighting, and the public is still demanding to know what really happened. One piece of this is the Victim Compensation Fund that was set up using his estate. So far, it's paid out over $121 million to more than 150 survivors. Of course, no amount of money can undo the damage, but it's at least some small measure of justice. And what about those infamous files everyone talks about? Well, there's actually a law, the Epstein Files Transparency Act, that's supposed to get all these documents released. And some have been, but there's still a fight over more than 1 million pages that are sealed. A lot of people believe it's less about protecting victims and more about protecting the powerful people whose names are in there. You know, when you look at this whole mess, a mess that only came to light because of the incredible courage of his victims, it really drills home one simple, powerful truth. And really, that's the question that's still hanging in the air, isn't it? Epstein might be gone, but with so many documents still under lock and key, and so many powerful names still in the shadows, you have to wonder, are his secrets really buried with him, or is the full truth still out there waiting to be found?